But locally, we have an auspicious situation with the Illawarra Acts. The very first Indigenous land use agreement came down from Byron Bay, and it has a very interesting history, because down in Byron Bay in 1986, Arnie Millie was called across by a particular politician. His name was Ian Cohen. Now, any politician who is a state senator is up for scrutiny, as are all the rest of them, and now we have two of them. They're joined at the hip, and her name is Jan Barham. Now, when Arnie Millie came across, Ian Cohen was an unemployed surfer. He was starting to get going his power base along the ridge line of Broken Head. He needed Aboriginal collaboration or assistance. Arnie Millie kindly came. Arnie Millie Boyd, by the way, is Harry's mother. Came with Lorraine Matthew Williams. They spoke to the people, they were applauded by the people, and they took a select group of people down, and Arnie Millie sang her song on the lake, thus proving and giving title deed. It's an interesting story there. That lake she had recognised together with the government on a 30-year process, through a 30-year process that included all the elders of this region who all deferred to her. They all deferred to her because of her knowledge of the law, song, and everything else that comes with it. Living law, living culture. When she sang that song, she was able to go back to Ian Cohen and inform him of a particular reality, and that is that his land, Serendipity, had a rainforest ordinance on it, which meant that it had to be in communication with national parks. And by federal law, that is procedural law for Aboriginal people. They have to go through national parks. The reason why that rainforest ordinance was on it was because it was close to an exotic and very important piece of coastal rainforest, the like of which you'll find nowhere else on any part of the Australian coastline. So that's getting interesting, isn't it? You know, when you start to scrutinise the local politicians. We've got time, mate, don't worry. When you start to scrutinise the local politicians. So Arnie Millie and Lorraine further informed him that that place was also a sacred site, a massacre site, and had rocks on it that were used to read the large cycles, celestial cycles of the sky, as they were across this region before they were bulldozed into dust. There's still a few existing. What Ian Cohen realised was to keep that contact open with the national parks meant that the elders would have the say on what he now considered his land that he bought with 5 shareholders for $50,000 each. It's worth about $8 million today. So you could see why he wanted to get rid of the original landholders and impose a regime upon him. He got together with his erstwhile companion, Jan Barham, who's recently gone to the State Senate and was the Green Mayor down in Byron Bay since time immemorial. But there's memories that precede these processes. She then worked for the Greens at state level, employed by the Green Party as a researcher. And that is when we come into the post-Mabo era. What Arnie Millie, when she realised what was happening with the native title claims, before native title, I should say, with the land councils, she stepped away and she put a heritage claim. Now please understand this. She put a heritage claim on those first pools where the women's law comes into Australia for their protection, and she instructed the Jarley Land Council to put a claim from Byron Bay all the way through on all that land, all the way across to Broken Head. That claim, that heritage status, it wasn't culture and heritage, it was heritage for all people, has power to stop the mining. And this is where we get to the sinister side of it, because it was realised that if that remained, it would become the model for Aboriginal people across the country by which they could protect their territory, and that had to be changed, as well as the $10 million for the property. And they then went about the weight of the federal, but particularly the state government, was put behind the formation of one hell of a bureaucracy. That bureaucracy is native title. That bureaucracy has now to deal with 15,000 native titles as Aboriginal people to scrabble across the country to have the tiniest little bit of representation on their land. That was the first Illawarra in Australia. That has now rolled out across the whole country and has become the latest model for the destruction, the surgical removal of all traditional owners. That battle was never dropped. Auntie Millie fought it out. Lorraine Maffey-Williams went down there and she created a women's centre for the women's law, and that was Nana Sisters Cultural Centre. She was there and she was bashed twice in her house by a thug from down south, and she was threatened on that land, and so the thugs were employed to push that woman off her land and drive her into an early Harry's sister, and she began to reveal the aspects of Narakal culture. Now the Arakal people, pardon me, if you don't mind, I'm not embarrassed if you're not. You should be. The Arakal people, the word Arakal is a bastardisation of the word Narakal, what Harry just introduced himself as. It was done by Tyndale, who named half the clan lands across Australia. He got it wrong when he spoke to Granny Charlotte, Harry's grandmother. There was one appearance of that in the historic documents. It was on her marriage certificate, and that was taken to launch the Arakal people in Byron Bay, the first Illawarra, and you've already seen what Illawarras do in our local region. It has opened us up without any Aboriginal resistance at all, even being legally allowed to mining, as well as the development and everything else. When the combined Aboriginal estate is worth multi-billions of dollars, and it is being laundered. Crown lands, when you consider Crown lands, when you go west of the Divide, across Australia, 3/4 of Australia is Crown land. So when you clear the people, when you find a person to sign the Illawarra, you have no resistance across the whole of Australia to the mining companies. That process was invented in Byron Bay. Ian Cohen, one of the two Green members of the Parliament, went on to be the Shadow Minister for Aboriginal Affairs. Not the Shadow Minister for Mining, Roads, Education, or one of the plethora of things there could be. Shadow Minister for Aboriginal Affairs. And as they designed around Lorraine, as they tried to drive her off her land, they never got her off it, she died there. As they tried to drive her off her land, the first Illawarra in Australia was designed by the Green Party and their two senators. The story is that the first Illawarra, now someone has brought me here to explain this to you tonight at last. Okay, at last. Does anybody mind? So it's not over. Because if we're an alternative people, then how come our politicians aren't taken to task and now are the front edge of genocide in Australia? We are no alternative. We are the same old bludgeon that has led these people to genocide. That's what was being done by the Greens in Byron Bay in New South Wales, and those two people are now our senators in New South Wales. That is what I've been asked to explain to you tonight. Thank you.